Hey, Mr. Pond
Here we
Boss,
go.
tell me what to do
Going live.
to make all my Lunker Lake dreams come true.
Hello, everybody. Bob Lusk, the Pond Boss, hanging out on a Wednesday night. Hoping you can join in and spend a little time with us. We're going to talk about some fun stuff tonight. I ain't quite sure what all we're going to talk about, but I do have a couple topics in mind. So join in. Let's see what we can do. Let me see if I can find. Look at there. Steve Alexander's already checking in. See if I can find it on my Facebook page. Here we go. Bear with me 1 minute because I'm going to find it so I can watch it with you. You guys know the drill. Hashtag Pond Boss Magazine in the line there. Click like, share it to your Facebook page. Click like, and you're eligible for a drawing for a Pond Boss hat and a mug. We're out of the mugs, and I know that Leanne's ordered some, but does the keeps the hot things hot and cold. This just keeps things kind of warm. But anyway, we got it. So here we go. I thought tonight I'd talk about, I see Jacob West checking in. Jacob and his dad, Bobby, came by today, and we were talking about how to stock their lake. So I thought I'd talk about that just a little bit. So let me find it here. Oh, there it is right there. Oh, I see what the girls did. Just say no to Corona. That's good. Look at there. There's Scott Hohensee with Purina Mills. Scott is instrumental in the wildlife side and with fish feed with Purina Mills. He is, man. If you want to know anything about feeding wildlife, Scott Hohensee is our guy. Spend time with him. He'll talk to you. There's Christopher Aguilar, the baby daddy, the crawfish daddy, showing up from South Louisiana. Jim Morgan, I see Jim. Holy cow! Look at there, John Funk checking in from mid-Michigan. Jim Morgan's over there in North Carolina. Jim, I've really enjoyed. I've gotten to watch or listen to a couple of your sermons on the radio over there. I love that. You know, this coronavirus thing, man, there's a paradigm shift going on that we really don't know about yet. Dion Myers, good to see you. Let's see here. Justin Ludwig. Clark Cole. I see Clark Cole. Good to see Clark. Checking in from Weatherford, Texas. Mike Cottrell. Good to see Mike. Chad Rogers. Good to see Chad. Clayton Bounds. Holy cow, y'all are coming at me fast. Jim Liner, stock tilapia today over there in Montgomery, Alabama. Good to know. Todd Austin, Chris and Carrie Lusk. Good to see you guys. We have the same last name. Jay Spires, checking in from Charlotte, North Carolina. Harrison Davis. Harrison's got a couple articles in Pond Boss Magazine. He's over there in Norcross, Georgia. Shane McIntyre. Hey, Shane. Good to see you, man. I got a really cool email today. It kind of made my day, and it kind of stroked my ego. If I had an ego, it got stroked today, which, I don't know, Jim Morgan might tell you I got one. I'm going to tell you it was satisfied the day I met Jim Morgan because Jim's done some Jim's got one of the coolest lakes I've ever met. And I love talking about that lake like that. I just absolutely love Richmond Mill Pond, Kingfisher Society. That is one of the coolest lakes that I've ever seen. And Jim gave me the opportunity to kind of grow and mature with that lake because, you know, that lake has got all the classic things of everything wrong with the lake. You know, it's got tea-colored water, pH 5.3, no alkalinity, fish won't grow. But by golly, with Jim Morgan's guidance and a commitment, which he's laughing at that right now, we made some fish grow really, really well in that lake. Let's see here. Oh, Christopher Aguilar says, one of my bass decided he or she likes Aquamax MVP. That's the best food on the market out there. You know, and I think that's kind of cool that one of your bass has figured out how to do it. Maybe that bass will go back and coach the others into it. Jim says the frog bite is on. I love, there's some in Richmond Mill Pond, which they call it a pond because that's the way it was in the 1700s when that thing was built. Well, I guess 1835 is when they started it. And I can remember that date because that was the year Texas became a nation or a republic, as we still should be. Okay, I know you're chuckling. That's okay with me. Let's see. Look at there. Dennis Smith is checking in from Pittsburgh, avoiding the corona. I love what the girls say. Just say no to Corona Wednesday. That's pretty funny. Here we go. Just say no to Corona. But anyway, that lake has got some, Richmond Mill Pond has got some really cool lily pads. And Jacob West, I know you're on, you fished that lake. You know, it's got some cool lily pads. It's got spatterdock. It's got some fantastic plants. It's one of the few lakes that you see where the plants manage each other. Where most of the time we have to manage the plants as pondmeisters, but that lake has kind of a sequence of events that go on through the course of a season where certain plants grow, and just as they want to become dominant, other plants grow up and start pushing them back. And then the next plant grows and pushes those back. So you've got this sequence of events at Richmond Mill Lake that's just, I think, just cool as heck. And each types of plants enhances the food chain in a lake that otherwise doesn't have much of a food chain at all. You know, now, one of the cool things about Richmond Mill Lake that not many people know, and Scott Hohensee, if you're listening, but back in the day, back 2005, 6, 7, 8, 9, through there, Mark Griffin and Mark was the nutritionist that helped begin to refine the Purina feeds for fish food, and we used this lake as one of our go-to lakes to see how well those feeds performed. And so part of Purina Aquamax lineup was designed as a result of work that was done on that lake that Jim Morgan owns. So I think that's pretty dead cool. Yeah, snot buckets. They call it snot bonnets over here in Texas. So who is in that photo over my right shoulder? That is Bob Lusk in the middle with Johnny Morris of Bass Pro Shops and Bruce Condello from Lincoln, Nebraska. All right, let's see here. Tracy E. Smith. Mark Hibden. Mark, I was just talking about you today. I want to give you a call here in a day or two. There's a fella called me that wants to build a lake up near Guthrie, and he's looking for a bulldozer guy. And, man, I would love to talk to you, Mark. Matter of fact, I was thinking about you this afternoon as I was talking to that guy on the phone. Lance Pearsall is his name. And he's thinking about buying some land and building a pond. And you know what? I owe you some time on the phone, see if we can help figure out a pond management strategy for you. Look at there. There's Bridget West. She's checking in. Good to see Bridget. Holy cow. Let me catch up a little bit. Trevor Cardea checking in from Statesville, North Carolina. Oh, my gosh. Have I got some cool stories about Statesville. I'll share it with you one. Just since we're talking about Johnny Morris. Johnny is right over here in this picture. But anyway, it's a long story, and I don't want to take up a whole lot of our time talking about that. But I ran into Johnny Morris at Big Cedar Lodge one time, and it was the weekend of the Talladega race. So he said, "Hey Bob, you want to go to the races with me?" And I said, "God, that'd be fun." He says, "Well, I can get you to Talladega, but I'm not sure I can get you home." So I'm going to fast forward because this is really a campfire story that is really, really fun. One of the fun things I've been able to do in my life that I look back on and shake my head like, how did that happen? So anyway, I got to fly with Johnny Morris in the Bass Pro Shops jet to Talladega. We picked up several friends, went to the races, which was huge fun. And afterwards, he was going to go somewhere else. So I couldn't fly on the private jet with him. So he hooked me up with a ride in Teresa Earnhardt's jet that was going back to Statesville. And Teresa Earnhardt's Dale Earnhardt's widow. So I got to fly on that plane to Statesville. And I was on my way to Richmond Mill Lake to go do some work with Jim Morgan and Dave Bueller. So I hitchhiked on a private jet, and I got to thinking, well, there were several people I knew in Statesville that subscribed to Pond Boss, but that's also where Ryan Newman lives. Well, I've got Ryan's phone number, so he had been flipped out in that wreck, not quite in that race, but not like he had in Daytona. I got a text from Ryan today. He was filleting some bluegill with his daughters, which that was really cool. But anyway, I called Ryan, and he helped figure out how to get me from Statesville down to Laurel Hill, North Carolina. It was really, really fun. Crazy story. Rob Wheaton, good to see you. Let's see here. So I love Statesville, North Carolina, which I've got some other fun stories. Tracy E. Smith, Trey Carpenter, working on my pond last few days, thinking about stocking with female bass only, because it's so small. It's pros and cons. Let's tackle that right quick. Tracy Smith got a 2-year subscription today. That's great. That's going to keep me employed for 2 more years. Thanks. All right, Trey. Female bass only. The pros and cons. The pros are that females will get bigger than any other gender. If you've got good genetics, like F1 tiger bass or pure strain Florida bass, the females are the ones that are going to get big. Now, in a female-only pond, I'll tell you the pros. The pros are you can pack them in there pretty tight. You're going to get pretty good growth rates from about 30 to 40% of them, which means you stand a chance to have a lower density pond and grow a higher percentage of bigger bass than you would in a normal pond. The cons is when you take away reproduction, you completely change the dynamics of that fishery. So in a small pond, I'd be all over stocking female-only bass and give it 4 or 5 years and see what you think. And if you don't like it, it's easy to change. So the pros are you'll have a higher percentage rate of bigger bass. But what you'll see is you'll see them consuming bigger forage, which means you're going to end up with a lot of smaller forage that they don't necessarily eat. And you're going to see a complete 180-degree difference of the population dynamics that you see in a male-female normal bass lake. Now, when I'm managing a bass lake to try to grow big fish, I like to selectively cull to protect the females, to skew the percentage more toward them. Now, I'll tell you this, I've only managed about 5 or 6 female-only bass lakes, and I've only got 2 of them that are left. The rest of them we abandoned after about 5 years because we were continually having to add a year class of female bass, and they're expensive. You know, they're like $25 to $30 per pound. And when you take an adult female bass that grew up in that lake over there, and you bring it to your lake, there's absolutely no assurance that that fish is going to thrive in your lake because it grew up in that lake. So you have several obstacles to overcome. What I found is about 30% of them would excel. And another third of them would be average or above average, and the rest would actually decline, even when we had all the forage fish they could eat. So, there you go. Holy cow, we got a bunch. There's Jerry Oler, one of the world's best videographers out there. If you need a videographer, if you need somebody to shoot some video of a wedding or a fishing trip, or you want to do your own TV show, Jerry Oler, check him out. Kyle McKean's checking in. I hope he's hunkered down up here near us. Frank James is checking in. Kevin Briggs and Jim Fritchie's checking in. See, Ken Riley Tennyson, how much rock substrate do you need for a sustainable crawdad population in an acre pond with smallmouth bass? Do several hand-built rock piles around 6 feet coverage provide enough for a sustainable food source, or will the smallmouth bass likely wipe them out? Oh, it's scrolling away. Let me look here. I'm wondering if I need to bring in riprap for more coverage, but rather not spend the dollars if not absolutely needed. Okay, Kyle McKean, yes, I do have bluegill. Holler at me and we'll get you some. Okay, so going back to Ken Tennyson's question, I'm going to presume that you're in the Midwest, so I'm going to tell you, if you've got several hand-built rock piles, it depends on the species of crawfish. So if you're in Missouri or Iowa or southeast Nebraska, through that area, some of the native species of crawfish there are burrowers. So you need some clay for them to burrow and reproduce, but they absolutely love to hide in rock substrate and graze off of plants and graze off of what grows on rocks. So how much is enough? I'm going to tell you that the rock piles don't provide as much food as they do places to hide. So as long as you've got some aquatic, I tell you what I would do. Here's what I would do. I would go buy a few square bales of hay, and I would stake those bales of hay right next to each rock pile. If you could take one square bale of hay that weighs 40 or 50 pounds, and if you can stake it right next to a rock pile for your smallmouth bass, the crawfish will come up into that hay and start grazing on it. Now, here's the hard part. It floats like a sponge floats, but it takes a lot longer to soak up the water and sink. So you're gonna have to tether it or stake it out. You know, drive some rebar through the hay to hold it in place. But you want that hay to stay right beside the rock piles. That would supply some food while you have the hiding places near the rock piles. So how much is enough? I don't know. David Cates, good to see you, man. Gary Marshall, Mark Cornwell checking in. Mark, I've been enjoying the heck out of your Cornwell kitchen videos. They're great, very entertaining, man. Tracy Smith, how many surface acres in a half-acre pond 5 feet deep? How many surface acres in a half-acre pond? Half an acre. Okay, the surface area is how much it covers. The acre feet is the average depth. So if you got a half-acre pond that averages 5 feet deep, you got 2.5 acre feet. 25. Let's do this. 1 acre, 1 inch deep is 27,000 gallons of water. So 12 inches is an acre foot. 324,000 gallons of water is an acre foot through there somewhere. Will tiger bass survive in Indiana with our winters? You know what makes them survive? The answer to that is yes. Here's what makes them survive, Dion, is your ice. Because what happens when you get that layer of ice on top of the water, it preserves the temperature beneath it. So where people in the middle of Oklahoma, even into North Texas, our water temperature can get to 32.5 degrees because we don't get ice. Where your water temperature won't do that. Once you get a layer of ice on top of that water, it insulates the frigid temperatures above the ice and keeps those temperatures from permeating down low and freezing upon solid. So your F1 tiger bass are going to likely survive better in Indiana than they would even in parts of Arkansas, Oklahoma, even parts of Tennessee for that matter. Now the bigger question is, are they legal? Check with American Sport Fish Hatchery out of Montgomery, Alabama. Give them a call and find out if they're legal. Those guys will know. All right. Let's see there. Jim Morgan saying hi to Jerry Ohlert. They've done some things together. Jerry shot a bunch of video up there at Richmond Mill Lake. Trevor Cardea, tell Ryan Newman to give me a call. He's got a nice pond that needs my... Yeah, we'll do that. Okay, so let's see. There's Anthony Abate checking in. I haven't seen Anthony in a long time. Good to see you, buddy. Hope you're kind of hunkered down and being safe right around Chicago. Frank James, Bob, I stocked 70 hybrid stripers, about 6 inches each, back in 2017. They're great fun, and we used to catch them fairly often. Now, though, I see and catch a lot fewer. How many are likely left, and would it be smart to stock some more? I'll tell you this. I don't know how many are left, and some of that is just totally contingent on the other fish that you've got in there. You know, there's always attrition. When you stock fish that are put and take fish like hybrid stripers, there's attrition, and you can't do anything about it. That's just the way it is. If you have otters, if you have eagles, if you have cormorants, but it's still wise to add a few more on these put and take fish like hybrid striped bass that don't reproduce. You put them in, you grow them up, you take some out, you put more in. It's a good idea to stock some every 2 or 3 years. If you do that, you're adding year classes. And every time, in a fishery loves to have different sizes of different species of fish. So if you've got one size of that species, that's not normal. So stocking more every 2 or 3 years is a wise thing to do. I can't tell you how many you got left. All right, so we're talking about what kind of crawfish, paper shells. I'm not sure what that is, other than paper shells. Crawfish shed their shells because that's their skeleton. They have to grow, and they can't grow if their shell's on there too tight, so they'll shed, develop a new shell as they get bigger. Jonathan Stoddard, I walked my pond the past few weeks, and I don't have any fathead minnows. Should we stock some fatheads? You know what? I need to stop. I got an email today from Donald Willis in Franklinton, Louisiana. And it was a very flattering email. He wants an autographed Pond Boss hat. So look at there. Here's a Pond Boss hat. And I told him I'd do a little shout out. Here's my little Sharpie. So Donald, here comes a hat to you. Which, if I had an ego like I was talking about earlier, I'd think this was a big deal. But I think it's kind of fun. All right, so look at there, Donald. There's your autographed hat. That'll be in the mail to you probably tomorrow or the next day, as soon as Leanne gets to the post office. So I'm flattered that anybody wants an autographed hat. Okay, Mark Cornwell says, paper shells are mud burrowers. That's good. All right, Devin Thompson, first time catching your show live. I've learned so much from them. That's cool. I'm glad. Thank you for that comment. Jonathan Stoddard, I walked my pond the past few weeks, and I don't have any fathead minnows. Should we stock some fatheads? Our pond is 1.5 acres in East Texas. Okay, here's the way we use fathead minnows. Fathead minnows are only used to promote the first year's growth for largemouth bass fingerlings in a brand new pond, or a pond that's catfish only. So we don't use fathead minnows ever in existing ponds. That doesn't make any sense. If you're going to spend money on something, buy fish food. If you need to add bluegills for a bass pond in East Texas. Buy a fish feeder. But fathead minnows, it's a snack. They cannot reestablish once they're gone. Holy cow, I'm getting behind. I really did want to talk about Jacob West and his dad, which I'm going to do that here in a minute. Now, listen. Last week, I got cut off at 7 o'clock. It's not Facebook. I don't know what it has been other than it has to be the storage on my phone. So I dumped a bunch of videos today, and I'm hoping that if that's the problem, that I'll get to go past 7 o'clock. But if I don't get past 7 o'clock and I get cut off in mid-sentence, I'm telling you right now, I ain't coming back on and dealing with that. So last week, when I got cut off at 7 o'clock, I tried to come back on. It let me come on for 3 or 4 minutes, and it cut it off again. So I'm not that technologically literate. I'm ahead of some people, but I'm way behind the curve. So when I took some things out of the iPhone storage, I'm hoping that it's going to let me keep going, which I don't understand that because we're streaming live anyway. So let's see here. Let me make sure I'm not missing something, because I think I might be missing some things. Yep, okay. If I miss something, I'll come back afterwards and answer them in writing, because we got a lot of people checking in tonight. This is great. Let's see here. Chris Piper, South Louisiana. Oh, Jacob West, congrats on the new grandbaby. Yeah, we had a new grandbaby born Monday, and holy cow, with this corona thing, there's a lot of joy, a lot of sadness, a lot of unknown, there's a lot of fear. But I'm going to take a minute and tell you this. One of the things I've learned in my 65 years on this planet is that things change, and we either embrace it or we fight it. This 911 changed our world. You can't go to an airport now like you could before that happened. It's a cattle call now, and you're sitting this far away from people. Everything's about to change. And I have a good feeling for this new sense of change. There's going to be brand new businesses that are born. There's going to be businesses that can't adjust. There's going to be businesses that do adjust. There's going to be families that adjust. I am so thrilled to death that we've got 2 grandchildren in our home that we've had there for a month, because their parents work in a hospital. Those 2, that brother and sister, have drawn closer to each other than they've ever been before. And I am so excited, because I'm going to step on a pedestal for a minute. Jim Morgan's going to say something, I'm sure. I hope he does. Because I believe that God is going to allow us to take this as an opportunity to grow and see His will and get way past all the negative crap that was going on before this all hit. So while we're hunkered down, we're having to look within. We're having to bring our people closer, and I'm excited about that. So I'm excited about some new business opportunities. I'm excited to see the changes. Every time we're afraid of something, it's because we don't know. But I know this. We're going to see some changes, and I'm pretty excited about it. Even though I'm 65 and I don't like change, I like this change. I can't wait to see what's laying out there. So let me get back to what I know, which is fish. Let me see here. All right, Chuck Brinkman, starting to call some of the underachieving bass in my pond, basically anything under 2.5 pounds. Everybody should have the luxury of culling bass under 2.5 pounds. But when they have the relative weight, like Chuck Brinkman's fish do, of relative weight of 110 to 125, He can be culling bass that are 100 to 95 to 90. They're feed trained. Do you think if we transfer them to another pond, they will continue to feed on the pellets, or will they transfer a new environment? No, I think they're so conditioned, especially if you put them in a small pond. If you move those feed trained bass from your small pond to another small pond and have the feeder going, they're going to make that transition just fine. Ron Ardwine, good to see you, buddy. Let's see, Chris A. Spur, long-time subscriber. Thanks for the website and the show. A lot of great information. Hey, yeah, you're welcome, man. That's super. Danny Mack says, have you had a fruity rum tonic? I have not, but I read your recipe today. I have not been able to do that yet, and I'm hoping to be able to do that. Okay, let's see here. Tracy E. Smith, I have a half... Ooh, holy cow, these things are scrolling by. Let's see, Kyle McKean wants to know, how do you test fish for COVID-19? I tell you what you do. Eat one and see if you get any symptoms. If you start coughing and choking and you run a fever, it's got it. Joseph Reynolds, Joe Reynolds, good to see you, Joe. Jason Nebstad, run a little bit late tonight. Harrison Davis wants one. I tell you what, order one online and I'll be happy to sign it. Holy cow, I got all kinds of stuff going on here. Woo. Uh-oh, something happened. Let me go back. Man, I've gotten behind everybody. You know what? While I'm trying to catch up, I'm going to tell you about what happened today. I got to spend time with Bobby West and Jacob West. Now, those guys, it's 6:56. I'm going to talk fast because if I get cut off at 7, we're done. Anyway, for the last 7 years, they've been building a lake, about 13, 14, 15-acre lake. It's a very cool lake, and I've been able to see it several times in progress. They've done it themselves when they've had time to work on it, and they finally were able to close the valve on it and get it going, and now it's time to start talking about stocking fish. So what we did was we came up with a game plan today, and the choice they made was to, let's see here. The choice they made was they want to allow the lake to mature starting with fingerling fish. So I love stocking a lake with fingerlings if you don't mind waiting 18 months to start having some catchable fish, because if we can stock it with fingerlings, little babies that aren't but 6 weeks old to 10 weeks old, they can grow up in that environment, and if they can grow up in it, then they can grow into that environment. But now, of course, in today's world, there's a lot of ways to stock a lake. You know, we can stock it with a handful of fish and spend less money, and it takes longer for the fish to mature. Or we can bump up that number a little bit and buy some time. So, I've even had guys that, you guys have heard me tell the green banana story. Some of you haven't, but I'll just tell you this. Some guys say, hey, I don't even buy green bananas, and I'm not sure I'll be here when they get ripe. Those guys in their late 70s, early 80s. So they want to buy big fish, they can catch them tomorrow. Well, what we're doing with the West family is we're going to stock double the rates of forage fish to ramp up the food chain rapidly, then come in and overstock. F1s and pure strain Florida bass are going to be about 2, 2.5, 3 inches long. And with the goal of watching those bass overstocked, watch the best of the best grow as fast as they can, but start culling earlier. You know, in a lake that's 13, 14, 15 acres, that's not hard to do. Now, if it was a 60-acre lake, we'd be talking differently. But in a lake that's that size, they can do that. So the whole theory is a certain percentage of the bass are going to grow faster than the rest. What we're wanting to do is protect those fastest growing fish and the next size of fastest growing fish, because they'll grow in different sizes. There'll be these racehorses, then there'll be the mules, and then there'll be the underperformers. So we're going to let the mules and the racehorses really jump out there and grow fast after the food chain has been built. And then start culling the underperformers and small males out of that population. So it's pretty cool. Okay, let me see what we got going on here. All right, let's see here. Oh boy, let me just bear with me for a minute. All right, amen on that. Tracy Smith says Jay Spires. Okay, I'm kind of behind here. Whew, Okay, now I think I'm going to catch up. I was back at Chris Spur, so now we got Danny Mack, okay, and Tracy Smith. I have an acre pond. Yeah, we talked about, okay. I have a half-acre pond. Tracy Smith, I have a half-acre pond, 5 feet deep. I want to put 8 to 10-inch tiger bass, feed them until big enough to put in my 12-acre pond. How many would you stock? You know what I would do? I don't know how big your big pond is, but if you're going to put in feed-trained bass and feed them in a half-acre pond, I'll tell you what I'd do. I'd put about 500 in there and feed the heck out of them. And then take the best of the best. If you don't mind spending the money on those things, and give the hatchery a little more time to get them a little bit bigger. Get them when they're about 4 inches long. If you'll put in 500 4-inch bass, and you know what? Let me tell you this. That's what I would do. If you want to put in 200 or 300, you can put in that many, but be sure they're at least 4 inches long because they're going to be more likely to come to your feeder. And feed them 5 times a day in small increments, and that way the most aggressive fish are going to hit that feed and they're going to grow fastest. Now, if you want to grow the whole batch, feed them 5 times a day, but bump up the volume of feed based on how much they're going to eat and how much they do eat. Let's see. They recommended stocking bluegill, so holy cow. Yep. Feed Aquamax 6. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Frank James, congrats on the grandkids. Thank you. Jay Spires, we plan to stock F1 tiger bass from Great American Sportfish. They recommend stocking bluegill and fathead minnows locally. Can you recommend a good fishery between Charlotte, North Carolina, and Floyd, Virginia? You know who I'd get in touch with? I'd call Foster Lake Management and talk to Johnny Foster or Mitchell Morgan. Talk to those guys. They can help you with that. Clark Cole, thanks for your enthusiasm. You bet. Heck yeah. Jonathan Stoddard, when should we expect the bluegill, largemouth bass, and tilapia to start feeding more? We've been feeding and fishing more the last month. Haven't noticed much activity all around. Pond is in East Texas. Any minute. Any minute. Any minute. You know, I keep feeding them. The thing about feeding fish is be consistent. The more consistent you are, the more consistent they're going to be. Now, here's the problem with East Texas. Our temperature last Wednesday was 91 degrees here in North Texas. It was 34 this morning. So when you have these ups and down temperatures, especially this time of year, it throws the fish off because your pond temperature can drop 15 degrees in a day. You know, so go ahead and be consistent with your feeding. And if the fish aren't feeding actively within another couple of weeks, send me an email at boblusk@outlook.com and we'll talk about in another direction. Right now, I'm thinking it's temperature related. Chris Piper, holy cow, we made it past 7 and didn't get cut off. Well, I'm not going to talk about it because then we'll get cut off. Let's see here. Josie says, yep, we're being given the gift of living beyond what is apparent. You know what? That is profound. Josie and Wayne are having their date night with us, folks. They're hanging out with us, and she is right. We are being given the gift of living beyond everything we see. And that's so true. And while it's painful, you know, for a lot of folks, that pain... You know, when I raised my kids, one of the things I tried to teach them was you really can't do with until you've done without. And when you've done without water, or you've done without electricity, or you've done without being able to go to the restaurants, you'll really appreciate it. And you know, there's a lot of young people nowadays that this is their first without, and it's really exciting to me. Chris Piper, my fish are growing well, catfish and bluegill. The problem is they're so used to my feed that they will not eat anything else. They all show up for feed time in the evening, but other than that, it's very tough. Could it be because my water is too clear and they're skittish? I'm assuming you're asking about catching those fish. Here's what I'm going to tell you there is, if you want to catch them, cut the feeder off for a couple of days. It won't cause them to lose a lot of weight. It'll cause their stomachs to draw up a little bit, and they're going to be more hungry. The other thing about fishing for fish on feed, it's best if you don't fish for them while they're eating. You know, the thing about Richmond Mill Lake is at one point there were 50 feeders on that lake. Now I think they've got it trimmed down to maybe 15 or 20 feeders. And you can go around those feeders and catch 1 or 2 fish, even though there might be 100 coming to the feed. So your feeder's going to go off for 10 seconds, twice a day maybe. You know, so there's 20 seconds out of 24 hours. So there's, what would that be? 23 hours, 59 and a half minutes the feeders aren't going off. That's the time to go fish for those fish. Go try to go catch them. We got to figure out where they are because they'll come to the feed, they'll eat, then they go home, wherever that is. Some fish live under the feeders. Some fish live out by that log out there or over at that rock pile over there. So if you can figure out how to catch them when they're not feeding, that makes your success rate goes up. Jim Morgan, 100% agree with you, man. God will bring good things out of this sojourn. Mindy had my 6th grandchild March 22nd. I love that. Luca, I didn't know that. Congratulations. We had our 11th on Monday. Now, the downside, just like you, we weren't able to be there, you know. And they came home today, and we're not going to be able to go meet that new one. We're having to meet little Jonah on FaceTime, which right now that's just going to have to do. I'm just thrilled to death that he's healthy. Let's see here. Harrison Davis said, would you say a 16% decrease in average relative weight from pre-spawn to post-spawn is common and typical for largemouth bass? I'm going to tell you yes. I do think a 16% decrease in average. So in other words, if a female bass that weighs 12 pounds drops 2 pounds of eggs and only weighs 10 pounds, that's pretty typical. So a 16% decrease in weight from pre-spawn to post-spawn females is normal. A 16% decrease in weight of males is probably a little exaggerated. All right, so Fred Bingaman, Chris Steelman, Kyle says, if you ever need someone to ride shotgun and read the questions, just give me a call. You know what, dude? You need to come sit by me when we do this. Ring my number. You got my cell phone number. Ring me. Let's do that. That would be so much fun for you to sit up here and let's do this together. That would be great fun. There's Drew Hay checking in from Pennsylvania. Mike Snook checking in. Good to see you. Yeah, we're doing good. Bruce Condello. Hi, Bruce. Just talking about you earlier. Let's see. Harrison Davis says, I'm pretty sure Reward is an aquatic dicot herbicide and is labeled for ponds. It is labeled for ponds. Kenneth Primo checking in. Devin Thompson. Holy cow, things are rolling here. Good gosh, y'all bear with me. Woo-wee. Tim Stewart's checking in. Devin Thompson, have you heard of anyone successfully building a pond here in Hawaii? You know what? I have Hawaii stories. I've actually been over to help manage a lake that Dole Pineapple built to flood the pineapple fields, and once they stopped raising pineapples over there, they turned it into a fishing lake. It's the only lake I've ever seen in the whole world that has smallmouth bass on one end, largemouth bass through the middle, and peacock bass at the other end, because runoff from Honolulu comes in on one end of the lake, and runoff out of the mountains comes in the other end of the lake, so it supports all three. But I think with the value of land being so precious, I'm not sure that building a pond makes sense, and I honestly don't know. But I do know there are ponds in Hawaii, the different islands that are being managed. Bruce Condello, his dad, and he are looking at an osprey. He's looking right over the quarry now. What kind of fish might he like to eat? I tell you what, I've seen ospreys. Remember, we were talking about Ryan Newman earlier? I was at Ryan's place one time, and we were shocking some fish right after the feeder went off, and we shocked up a bunch of bluegills. And the bluegills were floating in front of the feeder because I didn't want to pick them all up. And an osprey came and swooped down and snagged some bluegills. I've watched ospreys take bluegill out of the water while the feeder was going off before. I've seen ospreys. And so to preserve, and there was kind of a catch-22 because that landowner said, I don't know if I like the ospreys better or the fish. I said, well, if you like the fish better, change the timer on your feeder. You know, set it to go off at midnight instead of 2 o'clock in the afternoon. But ospreys, I've seen them take anything from slow-moving trout to, I've even seen them catch some largemouth bass. I've seen them catch largemouth bass at Richmond Mill Lake, you know, which you want to chase them down and shoot them over there, but they're too dadgum cool to do that, and it's kind of against the law. So Tim Stewart says, hey, let's see here. Chris Spur, Bob, any good pond lake management companies that come to mind in northern Indiana? Yeah, get in touch with Matt Rail. I think it's American Lake Management Company. If you can't find him, send me an email and I'll connect the dots. Matt Rail, R-A-Y-L. He's on this show quite often. Highly reputable. And there's another guy, Scott, E-S-S-H-U-P on the Pond Boss Forum. Scott's going to shoot me for not thinking of his last name right now. Send me an email, I'll connect the dots. But on the pondboss.com, Ask the Boss forum, Scott Schillig. Ha! I know who he is. I see his face. I've been around him a lot. So in northern Indiana, there's several people, depending on how far north you are. Let's see here. Trey Carpenter's responding. You guys got conversations going on. That's pretty cool. Let's see here. Ron says it's very fun sitting next to Bob during this show. Yeah, you can even drink wine. Yes, you can. Especially if you bring the wine. And Ron, this is the only time I can remember actually being pissed off because we were right in the middle of a great show and the dadgum camera, the phone cut off for whatever stupid reason it was, and we didn't, just exactly at the time your feeder went off. But you know what? We captured it, and we had a part 1 and a part 2. You can find that on the Pond Boss Facebook page. You can also find it on actually go to pondboss.com and click on the videos, and there's a part 1 and a part 2, and they're also on YouTube. You really need to see the show that Ron and I did together. Let's see here. I can't think of the name of that. Devin, I can't think of the name of that lake. There's Willie Howe checking in. Jim Morgan, I think we need to plan a trip to the Jordan Winery. My gosh, I would love to do that. You know what? When you're ready to go, ring my number. I'll call them and we'll go. They'll trade wine for knowledge. All right, let's see. Yep. All right, I'm scrolling down here. Let's see. Tim Stewart says chain pickerel are feisty in COVID-19 land. Yeah, you know, chain pickerel, a lot of people don't like chain pickerel. I think they're cool as heck. You know, the thing about chain pickerel in private fishing lakes is although a lot of people see them as a nuisance, I kind of see them as a value added, and they only live in certain types of environments, which Richmond Mill Lake is one of them. And I think it's kind of cool to be out bass fishing, and then you tie into about a 3-pound chain pickerel. Those are pretty cool fish, and they don't really dispute the other fish. Now they're going to eat some fish, but they're not going to compete at the feeder. They're not going to, wear you out because they just don't reproduce enough to be able to establish themselves. Willie is about as north as Texas as you can get. I bet you Willie's hanging out somewhere around Texarkana. Let's see here. Chain pickerel. You know what? Going back to that, Tim, I kind of like chain pickerel. Although I don't see them as really serving a specific purpose. The way I see chain pickerel is if you have them, you either got to learn to live with them or get rid of them. And over the years, I used to think get rid of them. But as I've studied them, I don't really see them as invasive. And if they are invasive, it's because the habitat and the food chain and the water quality is perfect for them, which means it's kind of taken away from the rest. Look at there. There's Gretchen Riley checking in. Gretchen is one of the go-to people at Purina Mills. And Gretchen, each time I do this show, I'm so glad you're here. I love to talk about Purina Mills. I've had a relationship with Purina Mills for a long, long time. And Gretchen is one of the go-to people there at the farm and an excellent marketing person. She's kind of the glue that holds everything together out there at the farm. I mean, she helps set up the meeting. She helps, put together the show. She's a go-to. And Purina is a huge player and a great sponsor of this show as well as Pond Boss, and I appreciate that. All right, Texarkana, not Corsicana. I got it. There's Josh Walter. He and I are second cousins. I think that's how it works. Let's see here. Devin says it goes by 2 names. Lake Wilson is the common and Wahiawa is the other. I don't know which one it is. The one that I went to is about 400 acres. It's shaped like a river. There's a homeless encampment on the west side of it that sits up a bluff. It's way down low. It rises and falls 30 to 40 feet every year based on the water usage and rainfall. It's kind of cool. So there's Gary Hempel. I'd say Dalhart. Okay. Well, yeah, you know what? In the far northern part of Texas, I'd say Dalhart too. All right. So, you know what? We got about 15 more minutes, so I want to circle back to the original topic and talk about what the Wests are doing. And this can apply to you as you're trying to decide what to do about stocking and managing a lake. So the goals there, first thing I ask anybody, what are your goals? And Jacob knew that. So they talked about that before they got here at the office to talk about it. And the goals were they want to catch some big bluegill. They want to have really good catch rates, meaning an afternoon of fishing, if they could catch anywhere from 10 to 15 to 18 bass in an afternoon, they're happy with that. But they really want the grandkids to be able to catch as many fish as they can. That circles back to bluegill. So they want to grow big bluegill, they want to have plentiful bluegill, and they won't thumb their nose at growing some trophy bass, but that's not the main objective. If somebody catches a 12-pound bass in 5 or 6 years, they're okay with that. But the main thing is if they can catch a bunch of 3 to 5 pound bass. So what the mission there is, we ordered 3 feeders for them today. They're going to be feeding Purina's Aquamax MVP, which that's the best feed on the market to be feeding bluegills and feed train bass. So we're going to stock bluegill at the rate of 1,500 per acre with 500 to the acre of red ear sunfish. That's double the American Fisheries Society recommended rate, and the mission there is to jumpstart the food chain. So by feeding these fish, they're going to expedite the growth rates of the best bluegills where they can start reproducing quickly. So what our goal is in the next 6 weeks, if we can get these fish here in the next couple of weeks, in the next 6 weeks is to get some bluegill big enough that they're going to start reproducing rapidly. And I'm going to talk to the fish hatchery and see if they can't get them to grade those fish to where we don't just have tiny fish, but we've got a few that are in that size class like that. Bluegills will spawn when they're 2.5 inches long. So what we're going to try to do is get some fish that are big enough to beef them up with some fish food. And one of the things I love about the West is they have spent the last 3 or 4 or 5 years not only building the lake, but building habitat in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. They've got some outstanding spawning beds with gravel. They've got them at a variety of depths because we know where their lake is over west of here, about 50 miles, that the water levels are going to fluctuate up and down. So they're going to always have beds that are sitting at different levels so that even with if the lake drops 3 or 4 feet, they've still got spawning beds for bluegill to reproduce. So they're focused on bluegill reproduction. So the mission is if we can get these bluegills in, get them on feed, get them ramped up and eating well, that they're going to develop some eggs, and the best of the best are going to start spawning. So those will be the fastest growing ones, genetically superior we expect, and reproductive. So we can get a jump start on reproducing bluegills along with fathead minnows. And then now the lake isn't full of water yet. We're stocking it as it's filling up. Now if we get some good rains in the next 6 or 8 weeks and the lake fills on up to the top, then we'll stock the bass in at the end of May, 1st of June. If the lake doesn't fill, then we're going to wait until later on to stock the bass in it. Now, what they want to do, they were asking me, should we stock F1 tiger bass or Florida bass or northern bass or mix them all up? In their case, I don't see a reason to stock northern bass. So we're going to stock F1 tiger bass. That's because they've got some water 35 feet deep, 33 to 35 feet deep when that lake's full. Deeper water mitigates the rate of temperature change. So the shallower your pond, the more rapidly the temperature is going to change. Their temperature is not going to change nearly as fast as a lake 5 miles down the road from them that's a lot shallower. So since they've got that circumstance, then I'm real comfortable stocking some pure strain Florida bass because we're right on that cusp where the water can get pretty cold, and if it gets cold fast, that can cause a problem with copper-nosed bluegill and Florida bass. The F1 tiger bass here, not as likely to be any kind of an issue at all. The reason to stock pure strain Florida bass is to keep injecting that pure Florida strain into subsequent spawns. So as these F1s grow up with the Floridas, we're going to have pure strain Floridas that can spawn with some of the F1s or spawn with some of them, some of the Floridas, and keep that genetic pool fresh. So that's the mission for that. Now, at some point later on, we may end up stocking a few more F1s, but that's going to be determined by what we see in subsequent spawns. So the very first bass that we stock in this lake are going to have the greatest potential to achieve the largest sizes. But once they begin to reproduce, everything changes because we can't control the rates of reproduction, so we don't know how many babies these bass are going to have. And when the bass start having babies, the population dynamics change, and then the growth potential changes. Because when those bass start reproducing, we know that that half of them are boys, half are girls. The boys aren't going to get any very big, and of those girls, even though they're genetically superior, you're only going to have 25 to 30% of them that have the propensity, the opportunity, and the aggressive nature to be able to get huge. So there's no guarantees that any of the subsequent spawns of any lake with bass in it, that any of those fish are going to have all those things that they need to get huge. Now we're talking about luck. And I want to extract luck from that equation by the time these bass begin to reproduce. So that's a story for another day at 7:20, and we're rolling. So let me see here. All right, let me see what else we got here. I want to back up because I'm missing some things. All right, Harrison Davis said, yes, we do. Yep, okay, let's see here. Tim Stewart says, can you describe what bass pathways or travel routes in a pond look like? Tell you what a bass route looks like. Believe it or not, bass travel. They like to move. They don't like to always sit still. Now, here's the caveat there. They're basically ambush feeders, but not pure ambush feeders. You know, a northern pike is an ambush feeder, a tiger muskie, muskies, even chain pickerels. Those are pure ambush feeders. They're going to sit in shallow water and they're going to wait for something to come by and they're going to ambush it. Or a largemouth bass prefers to be an ambush feeder, but they'll also travel. So what bass like to do, and any fish that travels, well, I'm going to back off that statement. Hybrid stripers are different. Largemouth bass like to go from point to point to point to point if they have that reference. So what a travel corridor looks like is, see, fish can't think, Tim. They can only react to conditioning and instinct. So if they know there's a reference point where they can go from this brush pile to that rock pile to that log jam to that beaver lodge, that's what they're more likely to do. Now, there's still some randomness to their travel, but if they can run alongside of a log and then turn down a cut in a channel, you know, and go through a funnel like deer do, that's more about how a travel path works for a bass. And it can vary in depth anywhere from 6 inches to 10 or 12 feet or right at the thermocline. Okay, let's see here. Yep, that's Wilson. Okay, let's see. The guy that I worked with, Devin, was a police officer named Tommy Smith. And Tommy just retired and moved to Georgia. Yep, sure was. Okay, let's see here. Tracy Smith, how much weight will tiger bass gain in 1 year feeding Aquamax? They will start at 2 to 4 inches. I'll tell you this, they're going to grow at different rates, as does all livestock. You know, you can have 20 calves in a pasture, and they're not all going to grow at the same rate. You can have a litter of puppies, they're not all going to grow at the same rate. But what tiger bass will do in 1 year of feeding Aquamax, the females are going to grow faster and they're going to grow bigger. And of those, about 30% of them are going to grow faster and bigger than the rest. So in 1 year of feeding Aquamax, starting at 2 to 4 inches, and your feeding is consistent several times a day till they get bigger, I think what you can expect in 1 year is the smallest ones will be 12 inches, the biggest ones will be 2.5 pounds. Now there's restrictions based on how big the pond is. If it's a half-acre pond with 500 fish in it, you're probably not going to get any 3-pounders. But if you got a half-acre pond with 500 fish in it, you're going to be culling way before a year. You're going to start culling this fall. All right, let's see here. There's WC Thurman checking. I think WC lives up in Kansas, I believe. Good to see you, man. He's kin to Susie Willis. Devin just moved to Hawaii from Georgia. You guys traded places. Well, hey, at 7:24, you guys have hit me with a bunch of questions. I love it. Michael Eric, see him checking in from Iowa. Let me scroll back through here. Jay Niv says, I've been plugging away at my lake up here trying to cull out bass that all seem to have been stunted. About what percentage of the population of bass do I need to cull out before I start making a difference? I'll tell you what, I'm just going to shoot you straight there, Jay. You're probably going to have to cull way more than you think. Now, I don't know how big your lake is, but here's what I have learned. Depending on the age of the bass that you're culling, that's going to dictate what their growth potential is beyond. So in theory, you're going to cull as many bass as you can in hopes that the rest of them can grow bigger. But the reality is, if the bass that are left behind are 5, 6, 7 years old and they're 14 inches long, the growth potential is going to be 3 or 4 pounds, and that's it. So the fish with the best growth potential are going to be the young fish coming up behind them. So by about year 2 or 3, in culling a lake that hasn't been culled in a long, long time, the younger fish are going to pass up the older fish in their growth rates. So that's kind of how that works. So how many should you cull? I'll tell you, when I first met Ray Scott, I knew I was going to like him a lot, because as we were talking, Ray is considered the father of catch and release bass fishing. And he did that because they were pillaging of some of these public lakes back in the 60s and 70s, and he knew that had to stop. Well, I knew him being the father of bass fishing. When I met him in the 90s, I said, one of the first questions I said, "Hey, Ray, do you really believe in catch and release?" Or, do you really believe in catch and release? He said, "You know what, Bob? In the public lakes I do, but in my lake, we're going to take out every bass that we can, then we're going to take out that many more." He said, "I'm going to take out as many as I think we should, then we're going to double it, take that many more. Because as you're culling, what's going to happen, there's going to be more fish that grow into that slot." So here's the advice I'm going to give you. Weigh and measure some bass that you're culling. Weigh and measure them. And if you don't have a spreadsheet, send me an email at boblusk@outlook.com. I'll send you a spreadsheet where you can plug in the numbers, plug in your links and weights. And what will happen, you'll see over time as you start culling your bass, you're going to see that they're underweight, but then at some point, based on how many you cull and the size of the pond and what the food chain's like, you'll start to see their growth rates go up. When you see that, that's when you start to change your catch culling system. Then you're going to start being selective about which ones you take out. If you catch one like what Ray Scott says looks like an Alabama deputy sheriff, you're going to throw it back. Laugh at that for a minute because it's pretty fun. All right, so let me see what else I've missed. I see a few more questions coming down the pipe here. Jerry Oler, if you want somebody to film, you bet. Yep, that's good. All right, let me go down here and look at the bottom of this list here, because I know there's some more coming in. Let's see here. Yep, okay. Okay, so we got some side conversations going on about treating plants. That's cool. All right, well, you know what? 727, I want to thank Texas Hunter Feeders for sponsoring this show. I didn't see Chris Blood tonight, and I'm sure he's got things rocking and rolling. And Purina Mills, thanks for your sponsorship. Pontini Boats as well, thank you for your sponsorship. The next issue of Pond Boss, we just finished it today. I've spent, 5 or 6 days editing, writing, and that sort of thing, and picking out pictures, and we finally decided on a cover image tonight, or to this afternoon. So now it's getting ready to be uploaded to the printer, and the printer's going to do what printers do, take some of that vegetable-based ink, squirt it on some paper, fold it up, cut it up, staple it up, stick it in a plastic bag, and send it your way. Even though we have had one reader from Oregon that wants us to get rid of the plastic bags, well, I kind of do, but I don't. So anyway, I tell you, I do appreciate you guys watching this show. And to Wayne and Josie, I hope you've had a fun Wednesday, and I hope you get to spend some time together. Holler at me, and let's talk about coming and take a look at your lake again, and we will have some fun and figure out exactly what you need to do with your fishery. And you know what? If you guys have been catching and weighing some fish, send me pictures. You know, I love pictures. I got to work on a lake last week. Holy cow, it was so much fun, and it's just great to see the rewards. If you want to see a little video, go to my Bob Lusk Facebook page and scroll down a little bit and get past the pictures of grandbabies, and you can see a video about a lake that I've been helping to manage for a long, long time. So here it is. I see John M. Wilson checking in. John, you're going to have to rewind and go from the top, buddy. Hope things are well in Ohio. Harrison, glad you're there. Good to see you guys. And Gretchen, you're welcome. I'm so glad you joined in, and I hope that you're sequestering well, and you guys hang in there, because change is imminent, and we better embrace it, and it's going to be fun. So, hey, checking out from North Texas, I totally appreciate you guys watching this. And if you have any questions or ideas or thoughts, email me, boblusk@outlook.com, and we'll send you in some direction. Whether it's the best one or not, you can figure that out. So until next Wednesday, from World Headquarters of Pond Boss Magazine, I'm going to say adios for now. See you later.